The silence was deafening. It echoed the hollowness that had taken root deep inside me. The phone still clutched in my hand, the dial tone a mocking reminder of the conversation that had just transpired, a conversation that had ripped a hole in the already fragile fabric of my family. The words hung in the air, sharp and cruel, severing the ties that I had foolishly believed were unbreakable. They didn't want me there. Not this year. Not when my mere presence might somehow tarnish the carefully constructed image they desperately wanted to project. If you've ever felt betrayed by your own family, subscribe now and share your story in the comments. Thanksgiving. It was supposed to be a time for togetherness, for gratitude, for reaffirming the bonds that held us together. Every year since I was a child, our family had gathered around the same worn wooden table, laden with food, laughter, and shared memories. But this year, everything was different. This year, I was deemed a liability, an embarrassment, someone to be hidden away for the sake of appearances. It had started with a simple phone call from my mother, her voice unusually strained, as if she were rehearsing lines from a poorly written play. She began by rambling about how important it was for my sister, Bethany, to make a good impression on her new boyfriend, Chad. Apparently, this Chad held some significant position at some fancy finance firm, and Bethany was convinced that this Thanksgiving dinner was crucial to solidifying their relationship. I listened patiently, wondering where this was going, trying to decipher the hidden message beneath her carefully chosen words. That's when the knife twisted. My mother cleared her throat, and then in a voice that was barely a whisper, she said it. "Paisley, we think it would be best if you didn't come this year." The reason? My blue-collar job might make Chad uncomfortable. My hands, calloused and stained with grease from hours spent welding and fabricating in my garage, were deemed unsuitable for polite company. My passion, my livelihood, the thing that gave me purpose and joy, was now a source of shame for my own family. The insult stung more than I could have imagined. I wanted to argue, to scream, to demand an explanation, but the words caught in my throat, choked by a wave of disbelief and hurt. Instead, I simply hung up, the silence on the other end of the line mirroring the emptiness that was growing inside me. I tried to bury myself in my work, losing myself in the roar of the welding torch and the satisfying hiss of metal being fused together. But even the familiar comfort of my garage couldn't drown out the pain. The image of my family gathered around the Thanksgiving table, laughing and celebrating without me, haunted my thoughts. My name is Paisley, and I couldn't believe this was happening. The next morning, I was startled awake by the insistent pounding on my front door. I pulled on a robe and stumbled towards the noise, my heart pounding with a sense of unease. As I opened the door, I was met with the sight of my entire family standing on my doorstep, their faces a mixture of anger and desperation. My father, usually a man of calm composure, was red-faced and shouting about how ungrateful I was. My mother wrung her hands nervously, her eyes darting around as if she expected someone to jump out from the bushes. And Bethany stood behind them, her expression a mixture of smugness and triumph. But then I saw him. Chad. He stood at the edge of the group, his eyes wide with shock, his face pale. He was staring at my garage, at the half-finished motorcycle frame that sat on a workbench, at the intricate metal sculptures that adorned my walls. He looked like he had seen a ghost. I couldn't understand what was happening, but a strange sense of anticipation began to build within me. It was then that Chad spoke, his voice barely audible above the din of my family's outrage. He said something that changed everything. The words Chad spoke were simple, yet they carried the weight of 1,000 secrets. He said, "Bethany, that's the bike I commissioned. The Phoenix Project. Paisley, you're the artist I've been trying to find for 6 months." The air crackled with disbelief as the truth crashed down upon my family like a tidal wave. Bethany's face contorted in a mask of fury as she launched into a tirade, accusing Chad of being foolish and naive, claiming that I was nothing more than a grease-covered nobody trying to scam him. But Chad stood his ground, his voice firm as he recounted the intricate details of the motorcycle design we had discussed over countless emails, the shared vision we had forged for a machine that was more than just metal and chrome. It was a symbol of rebirth and resilience. The irony was brutal. The very thing they sought to hide, my passion and my skill, was the thing that had brought Chad to my doorstep, exposing their shallow values and their cruel deception. My father, sensing the shift in power, stammered, attempting to backpedal, but the damage was already done. The carefully constructed facade of their perfect Thanksgiving was crumbling before their eyes. I watched, a strange sense of detachment washing over me as my family imploded. The anger that had been simmering within me began to cool, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They wanted to judge me based on my job. They wanted to prioritize appearances over genuine connection. Fine. I would show them what I was truly capable of. I closed the door in their faces, the sound echoing like a final punctuation mark on a chapter of my life. The following weeks were a blur of activity. I threw myself into the Phoenix Project, pouring all my energy and emotion into every weld, every curve, every detail. The garage became my sanctuary, the roar of the machines my therapy. Sleep was a luxury I could barely afford, fueled by caffeine and a burning desire to prove myself. But beneath the surface of my outward focus, the hurt lingered. Sleepless nights were spent replaying the phone call, the faces of my family on my doorstep, the sting of their betrayal. It was a constant battle to push back the negativity, to remind myself that their opinions didn't define me. I started isolating myself. I didn't pick up the phone when my mother called. I ignored Bethany's increasingly frantic texts. I couldn't face them. Not yet. I needed to heal, to rebuild my self-worth, to find strength in my own accomplishments. The weight of their rejection was heavy, a constant reminder of the fragile nature of family bonds. I questioned everything, wondering if I had misread their intentions all these years, if I had been blind to the cracks in our foundation. Maybe we were never as close as I thought. As Thanksgiving Day approached, the wounds felt fresh, as if they had just happened. The aroma of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie wafted from the houses around me, a painful reminder of the traditions I was missing. I considered escaping, driving far away from the city, burying myself in some remote wilderness where I couldn't hear the echoes of laughter and cheer. But then an idea sparked, a flicker of defiance that grew into a burning flame. I wouldn't hide. I wouldn't let them dictate my actions. I would celebrate Thanksgiving on my own terms, surrounded by people who appreciated me for who I was, not what I did. I reached out to my friends, the tight-knit community of artists and craftsmen who had always supported my work. I organized a potluck gathering in my garage, inviting everyone to bring their favorite dish and share in a celebration of creativity and authenticity. The response was overwhelming. People offered to help decorate, to bring extra tables and chairs, to contribute music and entertainment. The garage was soon transformed into a vibrant space, filled with laughter, conversation, and the aroma of 100 different culinary creations. As I looked around at the faces of my chosen family, I realized that I wasn't alone. I had built a support system that was stronger and more resilient than any blood relation. And as I raised a glass in a toast, I felt a sense of gratitude that transcended the pain of the past. I was thankful for my talent, for my friends, and for the opportunity to create a life that was truly my own. However, the events of Thanksgiving were only the beginning. Unbeknownst to me, my family was about to escalate the conflict in ways I couldn't have imagined, pushing me to the brink and setting in motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to their downfall. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew about family and loyalty. It was a dark time, filled with sleepless nights and a constant struggle to maintain my sanity. But amidst the darkness, a spark of resilience ignited within me, a determination to not only survive but to thrive in the face of adversity. The day after my defiant Thanksgiving, I woke to a nightmare. My garage, my sanctuary, was gone, reduced to ashes and twisted metal. The Phoenix Project, the symbol of my rebirth, was nothing but a charred skeleton. The crimson glow of the morning sun reflected off the wet pavement, a cruel reminder of the fire that had consumed everything. The police investigation was swift, but the conclusion was a punch to the gut: arson. And while they couldn't prove it, I knew in my heart who was responsible. Bethany, she had always been jealous of my talent, my independence, my ability to create something from nothing. This was her ultimate act of spite, a desperate attempt to erase me from existence. The insurance barely covered a fraction of the damage. Years of savings gone in a single night. My tools, my equipment, the materials I had painstakingly collected, all turned to dust. I stood amidst the wreckage, numb with disbelief, the acrid smell of smoke clinging to my clothes and hair. It wasn't just my garage that had been destroyed. It was my spirit, my hope, my faith in humanity. This wasn't just a prank. It was an attempt to silence me, to crush my dreams, to make me disappear. And for a moment, I thought they had succeeded. I sank into a deep depression, isolating myself from the world, unable to face the devastation. The phone calls from my friends went unanswered. The offers of help were ignored. I couldn't bear to see their pity, their concern. I felt like a failure, a fraud, a broken machine that was beyond repair. I spent days staring at the ceiling, replaying the events that had led me to this point, wondering if I could have done something differently, if I could have prevented this catastrophe. The weight of my family's betrayal was crushing, a constant reminder of my own perceived inadequacy. I stopped eating, stopped showering, stopped caring. I was lost in a fog of despair, convinced that there was no way out. One evening, as I was aimlessly scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a post about the Phoenix Project. It was a picture of the motorcycle frame, taken before the fire, accompanied by a caption praising my artistry and my dedication. The comments were filled with messages of support, encouragement, and admiration. People who had never met me were offering their condolences, their prayers, their willingness to help me rebuild. And then I saw it, a comment from Chad. He wrote, "Paisley, I know this is a difficult time, but don't give up. Your talent is a gift, and the world needs to see it. I'm here for you, whatever you need." His words cut through the fog of my depression like a ray of sunlight. It was a reminder that I wasn't alone, that there were people who believed in me, who valued my work, who cared about my well-being. That night I had a dream. I was standing in my garage, surrounded by flames. But instead of being consumed by the fire, I was forging something new from the ashes. I was hammering, welding, shaping the molten metal into a beautiful, powerful machine. And as I worked, I felt a sense of strength and determination that I had never felt before. I woke up with a start, my heart pounding, my mind racing. The dream was a message, a sign that I couldn't let my family's actions define me. I had to rise from the ashes just like the phoenix. But this time I would be different. I wouldn't be naive, I wouldn't be trusting, I wouldn't be vulnerable. I would be calculating, strategic, and ruthless. I would use their own weapons against them. I would expose their lies, their deceit, their cruelty. I would make them pay for what they had done to me. The first step was to gather evidence. I started meticulously documenting everything, from the insurance report to the police investigation to the social media posts. I reread Bethany's texts, searching for clues, for inconsistencies, for anything that could link her to the arson. I contacted a private investigator, a discreet professional who could uncover the truth without alerting my family. I knew it was a risky move, but I was desperate. I needed to know for sure if Bethany was behind the fire. And if she was, I would make sure she faced the consequences. I also started researching my family's finances, their business dealings, their hidden assets. I knew they had secrets, skeletons in their closet that they were desperate to keep hidden, and I was determined to find them. I spent hours poring over documents, searching for irregularities, for loopholes, for anything that could give me leverage. It was a tedious, exhausting process, but I was fueled by a burning desire for revenge. I would not rest until I had exposed their true nature to the world. I started transforming my anger and grief into a steely resolve. I began working out, pushing my body to its limits, channeling my rage into physical strength. I learned self-defense techniques, honing my skills, preparing myself for any confrontation. I cut off all contact with my family, refusing to engage in their attempts to manipulate me. I became a ghost, a shadow, a force to be reckoned with. They thought they had broken me, but they were wrong. They had created a monster. The old Paisley was gone, replaced by someone colder, sharper, and more determined. I was no longer a victim, I was a predator, and I was coming for them. The plan began to take shape, a carefully constructed web of deception and exposure. I would use their own arrogance against them, lulling them into a false sense of security, making them believe that they had won. And then, when they least expected it, I would strike. I would expose their lies, their hypocrisy, their cruelty. I would tear down their carefully constructed facade and reveal the ugliness beneath. I would make them feel the same pain that they had inflicted on me. The plan was risky, audacious, and potentially devastating, but I was willing to do whatever it took to get my revenge. This wasn't just about the garage or the Thanksgiving dinner or the insults. It was about justice, about holding them accountable for their actions, about reclaiming my life. I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with challenges and obstacles. But I was prepared. I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. The fire had destroyed my past, but it had also forged my future. a future where I was in control, where I was the master of my own destiny. And as I looked out at the city skyline, I smiled. The game had just begun. The smile they saw was a mask, a carefully crafted facade designed to lull them into a false sense of security. Beneath it, the gears of my revenge were already turning. My first priority was confirming Bethany's involvement in the arson. The private investigator I hired was a former forensic accountant with a knack for uncovering hidden trails. He started by discreetly interviewing neighbors, canvassing the area for any security footage that might have captured Bethany near my garage on the night of the fire. He also delved into her financial records, looking for any unusual transactions or payments that could be linked to the act. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to be certain before I made my next move. While the investigator worked on that angle, I focused on my family's business dealings. My father and Bethany had always been secretive about their finances, but I knew they were involved in some shady real estate ventures. I started digging through public records, property filings, and corporate documents, searching for any evidence of fraud, tax evasion, or other illegal activities. It was like navigating a maze, but I was determined to find my way to the center. I also installed a sophisticated surveillance system in my own home, including hidden cameras and audio recorders, to document any interactions I had with my family. I knew they would eventually try to contact me, to apologize, or to manipulate me, and I wanted to be prepared. Every conversation, every gesture, every expression would be recorded and analyzed, providing me with valuable ammunition for my plan. One afternoon, I received a call from the private investigator. He had uncovered a crucial piece of evidence: security footage from a nearby gas station that showed Bethany filling a gas can just hours before the fire. The footage was grainy, but the timestamp and the distinctive features of her car were undeniable. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was enough to raise serious questions. He also discovered a series of large cash withdrawals from Bethany's account in the days leading up to the fire, which further fueled my suspicions. I felt a surge of anger, but I quickly suppressed it. This was exactly what I needed. I thanked the investigator and told him to continue digging, to leave no stone unturned. I knew that Bethany wouldn't confess easily, but I was confident that I could corner her. The next phase of my plan involved manipulating my family into revealing their secrets. I started by subtly spreading rumors about my own financial situation, suggesting that I was on the verge of bankruptcy and desperate for cash. I knew that my father and Bethany would be monitoring my social media accounts, and I wanted them to think that I was vulnerable and desperate. I also reached out to a few of their business associates, posing as a potential investor, and started asking probing questions about their real estate projects. I feigned ignorance, but I carefully steered the conversations towards sensitive topics, hoping to elicit incriminating information. It was a delicate balancing act, but I was determined to play them like a fiddle. My goal was to create an environment of paranoia and mistrust, to make them turn on each other. I wanted them to believe that their secrets were about to be exposed, and that the only way to protect themselves was to betray each other. As the weeks passed, I could feel the tension building. My mother started calling me more frequently, her voice filled with forced concern and thinly veiled curiosity. Bethany sent me a series of text messages, apologizing for her behavior and begging me to forgive her. My father even showed up at my door one evening, offering to help me with my financial problems. I played along, acting contrite and grateful, but inside I was seething. I knew they were just trying to assess the damage, to gauge how much I knew, but I was careful not to reveal anything. I kept my cards close to my chest, waiting for the right moment to strike. One evening, as I was reviewing the surveillance footage from my home, I noticed something odd. Bethany had come to my door while I was out, and she had spent several minutes tampering with the lock. She didn't realize that the camera was hidden in a birdhouse directly overhead, capturing every move. I zoomed in on the footage and saw her using a small tool to pick the lock. It was clear that she was planning to break into my house, presumably to search for evidence or to plant something incriminating. My anger reached a boiling point. This was beyond the pale. She wasn't just trying to ruin my life, she was actively endangering me. I knew then that I couldn't wait any longer. It was time to put my plan into action. I contacted a lawyer, a sharp, experienced litigator who specialized in corporate fraud and defamation. I showed him the evidence I had collected, including the security footage, the financial records, and the private investigator's report. He was impressed. He said that I had a strong case and that he was confident that we could win. We discussed the legal options, weighing the pros and cons of each approach. We decided to pursue a multi-pronged strategy, including a civil lawsuit for arson and defamation and a criminal complaint for fraud and conspiracy. We also decided to contact the local news media to expose my family's crimes to the public. I knew it was a risky move, but I was willing to take the chance. I wanted to make sure that they were held accountable for their actions, not just in the courtroom, but in the court of public opinion. The anticipation was building, a mixture of excitement and dread. I knew that the next few weeks would be the most challenging of my life, but I was prepared. I had spent months planning and preparing, and I was confident that I could outsmart my family and bring them to justice. The old Paisley was gone, replaced by a force of nature, a whirlwind of vengeance, and I was about to unleash that force upon them. The discovery that would shatter their world came unexpectedly, buried deep within the real estate documents I had been scrutinizing for weeks. It wasn't a blatant act of fraud, not initially. It was a pattern, a subtle shifting of assets, a series of shell corporations designed to obscure ownership. But then I found it. A single document, a land deed with a forged signature, notarized by a known associate of my father's. The land in question was a prime piece of waterfront property, worth millions, that had been illegally transferred from a charity for underprivileged children into a private account controlled by Bethany. It was disgusting. It was also the linchpin I needed. This wasn't just about personal betrayal anymore. This was about exploiting vulnerable children for personal gain. The rage that had been simmering within me for months finally reached a boiling point. My vision blurred, the taste of iron filled my mouth, and I felt a cold, calculating resolve settle over me. This was it. This was how I would bring them down. The trap had to be perfect, irresistible. I decided to leverage their greed, their insatiable desire for more. I subtly leaked information about a potential buyer for the waterfront property, someone willing to pay well above market value. I made sure the information reached my father and Bethany through their network of informants, knowing they wouldn't be able to resist the temptation. I painted a picture of a naive, foreign investor, eager to close the deal quickly and discreetly, someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. I knew they would jump at the opportunity to cash out, to launder the money and disappear before anyone discovered their scheme. The next step was to create a sense of urgency, to make them believe that the deal was about to slip through their fingers. I fabricated a competing offer, a rival investor who was also interested in the property, driving up the price and creating a bidding war. I knew that my father and Bethany would do anything to win, even if it meant cutting corners or taking unnecessary risks. I arranged a meeting with them, posing as a representative for the foreign investor. The meeting was held at a neutral location, a high-end restaurant in the city, far from their usual haunts. I arrived dressed impeccably, exuding confidence and wealth, playing the part of a sophisticated negotiator. My father and Bethany were clearly eager, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. They showered me with compliments, trying to charm me to win me over. I played along, flattering them, pretending to be impressed by their business acumen. I presented them with a preliminary offer, a staggering amount of money for the waterfront property, far more than it was worth. Their faces lit up, their greed barely concealed. They immediately accepted the offer, eager to close the deal as soon as possible. I told them that the investor required a final inspection of the property before signing the contract, a mere formality, I assured them. I suggested that we meet at the property the following day to finalize the details and sign the paperwork. They agreed without hesitation, blinded by the prospect of immense wealth. As they celebrated, clinking glasses and exchanging knowing glances, I couldn't help but smile. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The following day dawned bright and clear. I arrived at the waterfront property early, accompanied by my lawyer and a team of forensic accountants. We had spent the entire night preparing the site, rigging it with hidden cameras and audio recorders, transforming it into a trap. The property itself was a dilapidated warehouse, a forgotten relic of the city's industrial past. It was the perfect setting for what was about to unfold. My father and Bethany arrived precisely on time, their faces flushed with excitement. They were dressed in their finest clothes, exuding an air of arrogance and entitlement. As they stepped out of their limousine, I could see the smug satisfaction on their faces. They thought they had won. They thought they were about to get away with everything. I greeted them with a warm smile, ushering them inside the warehouse. The interior was dark and dusty, filled with cobwebs and debris. My father and Bethany exchanged uneasy glances, but they didn't say anything. They were too focused on the prize, too blinded by greed to notice the danger. I led them to a makeshift table in the center of the warehouse, where the contracts were laid out, ready for signing. My lawyer stood silently by my side, his expression unreadable. The forensic accountants were hidden in a nearby room, monitoring the situation, ready to spring into action. As my father reached for the pen, ready to sign his name, I took a deep breath. It was time. "There's just one more thing," I said, my voice calm and steady. I pressed a button on a remote control in my pocket, and the warehouse doors slammed shut, plunging the room into darkness. A single spotlight illuminated my face. My father and Bethany gasped, their eyes wide with panic. "What's going on?" my father demanded, his voice trembling. I smiled, a cold, ruthless smile that sent a shiver down their spines. "The game," I said, "is over." The spotlight widened, revealing a large screen that descended from the ceiling. On it, the gas station security footage played, Bethany filling the gas can hours before the fire. Then the surveillance footage from my home, Bethany picking the lock. Finally, the land deed with the forged signature notarized by their associate. My father's face turned ashen. Bethany began to tremble, her carefully constructed composure crumbling. What is this?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "This," I said, my voice amplified by the warehouse's sound system, "is your legacy. This is the truth you tried so hard to bury." The screen changed, displaying the charity's website, pictures of the children they had victimized. A wave of nausea washed over my father. He understood. It was over. He lunged toward me, his face contorted with rage, but my lawyer stepped in front of him, a calm, implacable barrier. "Don't even think about it," he said, his voice low and menacing. At that moment, the forensic accountants emerged from their hiding place, each holding a thick file of documents. They handed the files to waiting police officers who had entered the warehouse unnoticed. My father and Bethany were placed under arrest, their faces masks of disbelief and terror. As they were led away in handcuffs, they turned to me, their eyes filled with hatred and betrayal. "You'll pay for this," my father screamed, his voice hoarse with fury. I simply smiled. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The story exploded in the media, dominating headlines and news cycles. My family's crimes were laid bare for the world to see. Their real estate empire crumbled, their reputation was shattered, and their friends and associates abandoned them. The civil lawsuit proceeded swiftly, and the evidence against them was overwhelming. They were found liable for arson, defamation, and fraud, and ordered to pay a substantial sum in damages. The criminal case was even more devastating. My father and Bethany were indicted on multiple charges, including conspiracy, forgery, and embezzlement. The trial was a spectacle, with witnesses testifying about their shady business dealings and their callous disregard for the law. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning a guilty verdict. My father received a lengthy prison sentence, and Bethany was sentenced to several years behind bars. Their world had been utterly destroyed, reduced to ashes by their own greed and ambition. They lost everything. Their freedom, their fortune, their reputation, their family. They were left with nothing but the bitter taste of defeat. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a sense of detached satisfaction washing over me. The fire that had consumed my garage had also consumed them, consuming their lies, their power, their status. I had exposed their true nature, revealing the darkness that lurked beneath their polished facade. I had held them accountable for their actions, ensuring that they could never harm anyone again. The process had been grueling, emotionally draining, and at times terrifying, but it had been worth it. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, my sense of justice. As I looked back on everything that had happened, I realized that revenge wasn't sweet. It's necessary. It was about self-preservation, about protecting myself from those who sought to destroy me. It was about sending a message, a warning to anyone who dared to cross me. I had emerged from the ashes, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The scars of the past would always be with me, but they would serve as a reminder of what I had overcome. They would remind me of my own strength, my own determination, my own capacity for survival. And as I stood there, gazing out at the horizon, I knew that I was finally free. Free from the lies, free from the hatred, free from the past. I just smiled. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice. Metadata. Title Bentata enus, Benamake enus, Benshesh enus, Benkoda enus, Benchesta enus, Benkodechil enus. Bentai enus, Benami enus, Benaptotishod enus, Benichilam enus. They tried to end me, so I took revenge. Thumbnail image of the protagonist smiling faintly against the backdrop of a burning building with police arresting figures in the foreground. Bengali text overlay, Benptotishod enus. Revenge. Tags, revenge story, justice, betrayal, family drama, true story, con artists, Bengali subtitles, min totishod, enus, min golpo, enus, min bishbashog hatokota, enus, min podibat, enus.